So I think we're developing now a series of episodes on the topic of CPSs. We did a what is a CPS?
Yes.
But we realized there's more we have to talk about.
Who would have thought that certificate practices statements, Tim, would be the hot topic? But here we are.
Topic. Yeah, and it is. It's kind of it's getting a lot of attention right now in the online communities that talk about the web PKI. And the reason for that is that it's really become clear in the last couple years that misissuance due to CPS misalignment, let's call it that, or misissuance due to CPS errors is a pretty high driver of the total number of revocations due to misissuance that go on.
That's surprising. But if you look at it, it's not surprising because that is what's been happening, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah. I mean, that's just factually the case. And some of this is governed by a few very large CPS issuance events. As we speak, there's one going on right now with Microsoft Trust Services where the total number of affected certs is north of 75 million. We saw some high volume events in 2024 from very large CAs, both Entrust and DigiCert. We saw high volume events in the years leading up to that from the likes of Let's Encrypt and Us-Sectigo, where the number of certs revoked was in the hundreds of thousands or millions. And these, or some of them not revoked at all. And so the likelihood, I don't have the stats in front of me, but the likelihood that your cert is distrusted due to what at the end of the day is a CPS alignment error is just very high.
So for those of you who didn't hear a recent episode where you very well defined a CPS, we're talking about...
I think we're going to call that what is a CPS. So go back
what
and
is a CPS? I would say that... Let me characterize it, and then I'm going to let you continue on this because it's fascinating. Like, so many misissuance, and the volume of certificates that are misissued due to CPS problems. We're talking about a publicly trusted certificate authority who has stated what their practices are and their methods.
Yes.
And didn't follow that to the letter. We're not talking about esoteric BR, breaking a rule that directly breaks a BR.
I think this is a good thing to clarify, Jason. It is possible that you have a CPS alignment problem because you have a practice that is against the BRs.
Right.
Now, under those circumstances, even if your CPS stated what you actually did, it would still be misissuance.
Correct.
So I would like to put that in a different category.
Perfect.
We can call that, let's just call that, BR non-compliance.
There you go.
And it's BR non-compliance whether or not your CPS says you're doing it or not. It's a misissued cert whether or not your CPS says you do it or not. Therefore, for all but the most esoteric of academic discussions, it's not important that there's a CPS misalignment because it's a known misissued cert. So I'd like to set those aside. And I would like to focus instead on practices, certificates that were issued according to practices that in and of themselves are 100% aligned with the BRs. But the problem is that the CPS does not allow that behavior.
And that's what makes this an interesting podcast because we're talking about significant amount of misissuance caused by not breaking a BR.
Right.
It's something else. And that something else is something that is against a stated CPS.
Yeah, right. And so, we could give a silly example real easy, right? If my CPS states that all my validation reps are wearing sandals every time they do validation, and the auditor shows up and someone's got closed-toed shoes, that's a CPS violation.
Perfect.
But it's not a BR violation, right? But if I said I was doing it in my CPS, it needed to be there. And that's an important point, because what the CPS is there for is so an outside party who does not have badge access to the confidential areas in the CA can understand, what does this certificate mean?
Right.
When this certificate sits there and it vouches that this domain belongs to this organization and that's really who it is according to this certificate, what does that mean?
A public CA cannot act as a black box.
Right.
And therefore, you can go to sectigo.com and find our CPS publicly.
So transparency is the most basic goal of a CPS. I think you can make a case that there's a CA accountability goal, because with transparency now people can see, is the CA doing what it said?
Right.
So a consequence of that transparency is accountability. So accountability is a goal too. That accountability is accomplished through the transparency. So the transparency is really there. That's what we're here to get. And in the event that the CPS is painting a picture and that picture is not accurate, that's a problem. And that's a problem where the only remedy today is revocation.
Right. And that's drastic, because revocations are hard.
Revocations are hard. Revocations are painful. Revocations are the remedy. I don't think they're the only possible remedy. They're the only allowed remedy now.
Tim, do you think we're going to continue to see misissuance due to CPS misalignment?
Yeah, I think what's happening is that there is more attention on CPS alignment than there used to be. I believe that the likelihood of misissuance due to CPS misalignment has not gone up. I believe that the likelihood of awareness of that misalignment has gone up.
Right.
I think there were a lot of certs issued in the past where the issuance practices misaligned in some way with the CPS and nobody realized it. And because nobody realized it, those certs lived their lifespans and they expired out and nothing happened. And I think what's happened now is we're seeing increased scrutiny on the CPS as an instrument. And as we do that, it's coming to light more frequently and in more volume where these misalignments occur.
Tim, I've got a two-part question.
Okay.
Number one is, I think we're going to have to create another episode where we go into an alternative remedy.
Yeah.
Right. Let's do that in another space. But the question I've got for you right now is, this is coming up a lot. What's the underlying? What's causing the more scrutiny? Where's the controversy?
I think there's been, and we've talked about this in other episodes, there has been an ongoing progressive across the board tightening of expectations on CAs. And I think this is great. And I think that there was, a whole lot of proximity rule going on a few years ago, right? Well, you didn't actually touch the bag, but you were near the bag, so we're all just going to let it go because baseball's more fun that way, right? And that is going away. And we are moving into more of an era where there should be rules that anybody can see, and they should expect those rules to be followed as they're stated. I think that's great. I think that's how it should be. And so this has led to scrutiny on a lot of things. And one obvious one is a CPS. It's a big, long document. It's there by its nature. It's available to everyone in the public, and any sufficiently interested party can go read it. It's in plain English, right? You don't have to know a special code. It's not, you don't have to have the right software. You can just read it. And so it's an obvious place for that increased scrutiny to occur.
Right on. No, that's good. So what are some of the things being said right now?
So there, we're just seeing these, again, we've seen a lot of these really big events. And in particular, if there's a big event, let's talk our own event. Let's talk about Sectigo. We issued nearly 500,000, we revoked a few years ago, nearly 500,000 certificates in less than 24 hours. And the reason was it came to light that these certificates, which were using a permitted Acme-based DCV method, were using a method that was not in the Sectigo CPS because we had failed to update the CPS. We implemented the method, it was a newer method, and we failed to update the CPS. It's 100% our error. Sectigo error. And as a consequence, these were not permitted. The DCV was deemed to be invalid because we didn't say we might do DCV this way. And so in less than 24 hours, we revoked approaching 500,000 certificates, and we had to. And it sucked, right? Again, but at the time, that was the only method. Like, that was the only remedy. And so one of the things that I believe needs exploration is, why does that really have to be the only remedy? And again, if our goals are transparency and alignment of stated practices to actual practices for an active cert that's in the world, I have to believe there's other ways we can do that.
So there's the setup of the problem.
Yeah.
And who in the world wants to be revoking that many certs just because of an error that...
Or any certs. Like revocation in and of itself is not a virtue. We're not... So mandatory revocation is a tool. It is not an end. And that's an important thing to understand. And we say, well, what are the ends and what are the tools? And we need to make sure that we're accomplishing the ends. And as we're doing that, we can look at the tools we use and how we use them in order to get there.
So what you're alluding to is there's better ways to get to the wanted end.
I think there may be. Yes.
Let's talk about that.
All right.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks.